We recognize that CVUUS gathers on land seized from the Western Abenaki people by European colonizers. We respect the Abenaki spiritual relationship to the land and waters of the Champlain Valley. We are committed to building a peaceful and more just relationship with them and to promoting knowledge about their history and culture. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to CVUUS, the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. CVUUS is a church that sustains a liberal religious tradition, aspires to be visible and active on behalf of social justice and environmental responsibility, nurtures and empowers us all at all ages on our spiritual journeys, and reaches out to the larger communities of which we are a part. I'm Carl Lindholm, today's worship associate. I'm assisting one of our contract ministers, Rev Tricia Hart, in today's service. We're glad that you have chosen to be here with us on this beautiful morning, the first day of October, the second week of autumn. Yesterday was so beautiful. Today promises to be likewise. Bracing in the morning, warm by midday. We can sit outside and watch the leaves turn today. Thoreau, our Unitarian forebear, is especially wise on the changing of the seasons. He described October thus: October is the month of painted leaves. Their rich glow now flashes round the world. As fruits and leaves and the day itself acquire a bright tint just before they fall, so the year nears its setting. October is the year's sunset sky. This is a good time to adjust your phone if you haven't already. If you're visiting, please sign the guest book in the foyer so we can send you news of activities and events that enrich our time together. And all, do stay after the service for snacks and friendly conversation downstairs in the Amross Fellowship Room. There are many pathways to connection here at CVUUS, activities and events, in addition to Sunday services that bring us together as a community. They are listed today in today's order of service and amplified in Wednesday's blast. Now, Ollie, you do have a little news of our Radical Love event.
Hello, my name is Ollie Coltrera. My pronouns are they, them. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Radical Love giveaway without telling you any of the details. So if you want to learn more about the who, what, where, when, why, Mike and Liam can tell you in the lobby or at social hour. But it's one of my favorite pathways to connection, because how many of you have gone down to social hour and looked at all these beautiful, cool faces and still chatted with the one or two people that you know well? I do that all the time. But there's so many cool people here, and the Radical Love giveaway is a great way to get connected with people you wouldn't have otherwise connected with, and give something of yourself that you're excited about. So when I moved here, I hosted a mending party in my first little apartment in Middlebury, and had a little eclectic group of people gather in the dark, cold months, and we sewed up some holes in our clothes and had a great time. I've also offered composting consultations and gotten to visit with some congregants and teach them how to keep the bears away or make beautiful soil for their compost. So those are just the things that light me up, but there's things that light each of you up that you get excited about sharing. So consider offering that, especially something to gather us in the dark, cold months ahead.
Today is also the annual crop walk, and I've asked Marnie if she would say a word or two about that.
Thanks for leaving the step stool. Hi, everyone. As Carl mentioned, it's the annual crop walk. We're sort of stepping up and in at the last minute, so if you were here last week, you heard this also. But today's the day, and I have been walking in this crop walk, hunger walk for years, and our congregation has been marvelously supportive. So I ask you again if you would like to donate. Today's the day, and so let me know. I will be on the green. Some of you know this is my favorite color that I'm wearing today, and I will have this hat on. If you want to walk, you don't have to walk specifically with me, but there's always a photo that's taken starting at 12:30 of each group. Other churches in Addison County are participating. Other folks who have no religious affiliation are participating, but this is a Church World Service sponsored annual crop hunger walk. So the important thing is not just to be doing good all over the world, helping to fight hunger, but also a portion of the money stays here locally and is divided between about 5 wonderful organizations that are supporting hunger right here in Addison County. So see me afterwards. Catch me after the service. I'll be around, and if you want to walk, show up, especially by 12:30, so that we could have an organized photo of us participating. Thanks.
Let us worship together.
That's okay. I invite you to rise and body your spirit. We're going to sing We're Building a New Way. The words repeat. So sing with love in your heart and vigor and harmonies if you got them.
witnesses of the world. It is now when we are called as witnesses to the world, of the world, to mend it, to change its course, to restore it. It is now when we are called to act on our values, not to hide, not to fear, but to be bold and loud. Thank you, Poppy. It is now that we are called to continue our fight for justice, to organize, to speak up. It is now. Let us gather. Let us give each other courage. Let us worship.
I always want to do this. As Tricia lights the flaming chalice, symbolic of Unitarian Universalism, please read along with me these words in your order of service by Unitarian Universalist minister Kathleen McTeague. We come together to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's face and see there communion, the reflection of our own eyes, this house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together.
If anyone would like to come a little closer for the time for all ages, please feel free. You can come up and sit on the steps or the floor or wherever you want to. This is an adaptation of a story called Higgins, A Drop with a Dream by Chris Bice, a UU minister. Once upon a time, there was a drop of water named Higgins. Higgins was no ordinary drop of water. She was a drop with a dream. Higgins lived in a valley where it had not rained in a very long time, so all the lovely green grass was turning brown, and all the beautiful flowers were wilting, and the trees were starting to droop. Higgins had a dream that one day the valley would be a beautiful place again. But what could she do? After all, she was just a drop of water. Higgins decided to tell another drop of water about her dream. Psst. He was not impressed. Higgins, get your head out of the clouds. You can't spend your whole life dreaming. Higgins decided that she had to take action. So she began to think and think and think. And one day, as she was rolling by an old bucket, she got an idea. If enough of us drops of water got together in this bucket, there would be enough water to sprinkle on a few flowers to help them grow and become beautiful again. Eagerly, Higgins told everyone her great idea, but everyone thought she was being foolish. That Higgins is nothing but a dreamer. Higgins decided that she had to do something to convince the others that she was right. Okay, I don't know about you, but I'm getting in the bucket. I hope some of you will join me. Then there might be enough water to help at least one flower grow strong again. So Higgins rolled as fast as she could, jumped into the air, and landed with a kerplunk in the bottom of the bucket. And there she sat, just a drop in the bucket. For a long time, Higgins was very lonely. It seemed like no one was going to join her. But after a while, some of the other drops could see that the grass was dying and the flowers were wilting and the trees were drooping. So suddenly, a drop shouted, "I'm going in the bucket with Higgins!" And he rolled as fast as he could and jumped up in the air and landed with a kerplunk in the bottom of the bucket. Then two other drops yelled, "Wait for us!" And they hopped through the air and landed in the bucket. And another drop jumped. And another drop jumped. And another drop jumped. And another. And then five drops jumped all at once. Then 30 jumped. Then 50. Then hundreds of drops came from all over the world just to jump into the bucket. And then the bucket was completely full. Eventually, thousands of buckets were full, and all of this happened because Higgins had a dream. And although she was just one drop in a bucket, many drops in a bucket make a bucket full, and many bucketfuls can transform the world. And now, Bobby, Kaz, and I, and the drops, and the younger kids will go over to religious exploration. So let's sing 2 verses of This Little Light of Mine. Rise in body or spirit.
for the offering. Our October donee, as you can see in the order of service, is Acorn Food Hub. Next week, somebody from Acorn will be by to tell us a bit more about that program and charity. So do be as generous as you can.
You can keep playing if you want, Ronnie. I want to tell you something. This is the 10th congregation that I have served as minister. And until I came here, I had not yet found another congregation that sang "From you I receive, to you I give" to each other in the middle of every service, the way my home congregation in Yarmouth, Maine did, the folks who sent me off to be ministers. So I'm grateful to all of you for doing that. And today, as I collect the collection, your gifts, I want to invite you to stand, if you are able and inclined, before you sing, while Ronnie is playing. Before you sing, take a verse of that wonderful song to just do what you already do really well, which is sing and look and greet at one another. I'm inviting you to greet one another and look at one another, and then we'll sing together, okay? Just give ourselves a little bit more time. Wonderful. Did you like that? Okay, good. We'll remember that for another time. So, several yellow cards, as I've learned to call them, from you, milestones and passages and thoughts and wishes and prayers that you want to share with each other. First from Ellen Flight, who says, "Let us remember the life of Dianne Feinstein, a life of many firsts. Trailblazer, glass ceiling breaker, and crusader for many marginalized people, she stepped into the breach during a crisis in the city of San Francisco after the murder of Mayor George Moscone and City Supervisor Harvey Milk. When she died, she was the longest serving woman in the US Senate." Rebel Allen says, "My 2 exchange students recently moved to a new placement as they felt they would be happier in a family with other teens. I'm deeply grateful for this blessed community." I think she means you. "You have supported me and the girls in many ways, enabling them to have an exciting and successful year here." Helene Vanderberg says about Helene and Larry that they're grateful for 59 years of marriage. They said, whoever they was, it wouldn't last. John Burstow writes, "May our thoughts be with Kate, whose 93-year-old mother fell a week ago today, fracturing her femur and her shoulder. She has had surgery and is now in rehab. She is an unhappy camper." I am not sure of the name of this person. Anthu Romero da Viega Martins. So, Arthur. Oh, that's an R. Thank you, Brett. Writes, "I turned 25 years of life. I'm grateful for all the poetry made from pain and all the suffering turned to song." And Francois Clemens, via Zoom chat, says, "Thanks to all for the good wishes. Looking forward to returning to CVUUS. May you fully understand my need for quiet meditation and prayers. God bless all of you. Thanks for the wonderful singing. It always inspires me." So now you can know that when you're singing, Francois is listening. So you can sing extra beautifully. Would you take a moment, please, and join with one another and with me in a moment of reflection, prayer, meditation, just noticing that you are where you are. Close your eyes if it helps. Take a breath if you can. Here we are in the midst of this hour that we call worship, full of life and sadness and joy and gratitude. In this moment, call to mind the people you are holding tightly in your heart, the people who are most precious to you, whether they're close by or far away, the ones you're worried about, the ones you hope are just a little bit worried about you. Call to mind your fears and hopes for the world right around you and the big world of which we are all a part. Help us remember that we each may be only one drop in a bucket, but we can and do make a difference every day. Let us hold these thoughts and prayers and rest for a moment in the not quite silence we make together.
Just a quick note about the next song. This is a round with 4 parts. So the 4 parts of the choir will help you sing. So we invite you, in a moment I'll kind of have people raise their hands to pick someone sitting next to you if you're not in the choir and kind of just sing with them. So the altos will be singing the first part. Yep, there you go. You can sing with an alto if you want. And then the sopranos will sing the second part. And then the tenors will sing the third part. And the basses will sing the fourth part. So we invite you to kind of pick someone who might be near you and choose to sing that part again and again as we go through. All right.
Today's reading is from The Art of Happiness, a Handbook for Living by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Howard C. Cutler, MD. This section was written by Dr. Cutler and goes like this. During the course of preparing for this book, I attended some teachings by the Dalai Lama on the East Coast. On my return home, I took a non-stop flight from Phoenix. As usual, I had booked an aisle seat. Despite having just attended spiritual teachings, I was in a rather cranky mood as I boarded the plane. Then I discovered I had been mistakenly assigned a center seat, sandwiched between a man of generous proportions who had an annoying habit of draping his arm over my side of the armrest, and a woman whom I took an immediate dislike to, because I decided she had usurped my aisle seat. There was something about this woman that really bothered me. Her voice a bit too shrill, her manner a bit too imperial. I'm not sure what exactly. The prospect of 5 solid hours sitting next to this woman seemed unbearable. It occurred to me that this was the perfect opportunity to practice patience. So I started in on the technique of visualizing my enemy in an aisle seat as a cherished benefactor, placed next to me to teach me patience and tolerance. I figured this should be a snap. After all, as enemies go, you couldn't get any milder than this. I had just met this woman, and she hadn't done anything to harm me. After about 20 minutes, I gave up. She still bugged me. I resigned myself to remaining irritable for the rest of the flight. Sulking, I glared at one of her hands that was furtively encroaching on my armrest. I hated everything about this woman. I was staring absently at her thumbnail when it occurred to me, do I hate that thumbnail? Not really. It was just an ordinary thumbnail. Next, I glanced at her eye and asked myself, do I really hate that eye? Yes, I did. I focused in closer. Do I hate that pupil? No. Do I hate that cornea, that iris? Cornea, that iris? No. So do I really hate that eye? I had to admit that I didn't. I moved on to a knuckle, a finger, a jaw, an elbow. With some surprise, I realized there were parts of this woman I didn't hate. This shift of perspective tore an opening in my prejudice, just wide enough to look at her as simply another human being. As I was feeling this, she suddenly turned to me and started a conversation. I don't remember what we talked about, but by the end of the flight, my anger and annoyance had been diffused. She wasn't my new best friend, but she was no longer the evil usurper of my aisle seat. Just another human being like me, moving throughout life as best she could.
It's okay. I used to think of myself as a taller person than apparently I am. It's possible that I'm not as tall as I used to be. But I can see you better from up here. As you may have noticed, the title today is Why Are We Here? So I want to tell you that very early in my ministerial career, in fact, before I'd even begun, I was on my way to seminary but hadn't gone there yet, the minister of my church in Yarmouth, Maine, moved on to another call. This was a planned, not a catastrophic decision. Still, it was a big change for us. And we had an interim minister. I was, just for 1 year, we had an interim minister. That was back in the old days when interims were 1 year usually. I was finishing my term as board president that year, and I was getting ready to enroll in seminary. And there was an open Sunday on the worship calendar, and I volunteered, and I submitted my title and blurb for the newsletter. And my title was, Why Are We Here? The interim minister, I don't remember his name, that's probably fine. He was taking an initiative to be helpful to a young whippersnapper who didn't know much. And he wrote me a note which said, all I remember that it said was, never title a sermon, Why Are We Here? So I asked him, why? When I talked to him, why? He said, well, you know, a big cosmic question like that, people will expect you in the sermon to answer all of the big cosmic questions. And you'll disappoint them, and you don't want that. I thought about this for a short minute, and I said, I don't think so. That's not what I'm planning to do. And I implied, I imagine, that I knew the congregation better than he did. We just left it that way. I did not change my title. And I am pretty sure that I have called at least one sermon at each of the now 10 congregations that I've served, Why Are We Here? Or some similar name. This is more than just stubbornness, though it is stubbornness too. The question I'm trying to ask, and I try to ask everywhere, is why are we here? In this place, in this gathering on Sunday, part of a congregation, whether you're a long-time member or you've just walked in today, why are we all here? What does the congregation expect of us? Thinking about that, I remembered the Sunday that I signed the book in Yarmouth. I was a person who had grown up in a Catholic family, an Irish Catholic family, so we went to church all the time and never ever talked about it. And I left Catholicism when I was 16 and was quite comfortable and happy with that decision because I decided that religion was for other people, was for people like my parents or people with less imagination than I don't know what I thought. We stumbled into this church in Yarmouth and I found myself signing the book pretty quickly, and I had a few bits of trepidation about this, and I remembered just the other day when I was thinking about the sermon, I remembered that right after I signed the membership book, the minister was right there, and he and I had gotten to know each other a little bit, and he said, "I'm glad you're here," and I said, "I'm glad I'm here too, but I need to tell you something. I'm a little nervous because I think that this religion, this Unitarian Universalism thing, expects something of me," which is a kind of a silly thing if you think about what I eventually did. But I think Unitarian Universalism is expecting something of me, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know if I'm up to it. And we left it there. He did not try to answer that big cosmic question. So why are we here? No one requires it of us to belong to a congregation, much less to devote time and energy and money to a congregation. And surely there are other things that we could all be doing. Few, if any of us, imagines that going to church will get us into heaven after we die, though more than a few of us were probably taught that when we were younger. I certainly was. And some of us may still hang on to that. But most of us, I'm not sure. Why are we here? What are we hoping for? When you ask Unitarian Universalists, as I have done in many congregations, what do you value most? I don't usually say, why are you here? Though that might be a better way to ask the same question. I usually say, what is it that you most value about your congregation? And pretty quickly, almost everybody says some variation on the community. It's the people, it's the people, it's the thing that we are together. And I have a lot of reactions to that answer, even though I totally understand it and have felt that way over the years. But my variety of reactions is both because I agree and because it's rather amazing that we say that, given how often and how easily we disappoint one another. Right? So this whole idea, church as community, is background both to today, to this Sunday, and to what I'm thinking of as Why Are We Here Part 2, which I will come back and preach on October 22nd. But rather than tackling the goal of community head-on today, I want to look at it in a couple of different ways. And today, I want to talk not about what we're here to do or what we think we're here to do, but how we choose to do what we do together. In other words, collaboration. Collaboration is an important topic to talk about during a transitional ministry. That's true. You'd be right if you thought that, for all the reasons that we know, but that might be worth saying aloud. Fundamental truth, ministers cannot do everything by themselves, for at least a couple of reasons. One, because alone ministers have only our own perspective and experience to work with, and none of us is good at everything. So that's reason number one. More importantly, because when ministers try to do everything, two things are guaranteed to happen. One, the minister will let at least some people down, and that shifts attention in the congregation to that failure, to that lack. I've experienced this. But the second thing that's guaranteed to happen is that all the people who aren't the ministers end up being and gaining less from their experience in the church. Let me say this another way. If the people of the congregation, of the community, are not invited and encouraged into the work of that congregational community, you will learn less, contribute less, and feel less good, not only about the congregation, but about yourself. And you might even end up being less in the world. That's how much this stuff actually matters. At least that's what I think. I may not have to prove this to you, but just in case, I want you to take a minute and think about something that you have done here at CVUUS. Perhaps you have or are now sung in the choir. Perhaps you served on the board or on a committee or a team or in the council of ministries. Perhaps you've been on or are now on the worship team. Perhaps because of this congregation, you've done some justice work that you couldn't have done by yourself, like the crop walk. Perhaps you have, with whatever trepidation, my husband, the Reverend Peter Newport, who's going to be here at some point next month, I think, is teaching RE today in Burlington. It's a middle school. Peter has not taught RE for a very long time. He had a certain amount of trepidation, but I think he's probably going to love it. Anyway, good luck, Peter. Perhaps you've reached out to someone who is having a hard time in their life for whatever reason. Maybe you did that as part of the caring network, or maybe you just did it because it was the right thing to do. So just take a minute to think about what difference that made, that action, that work made or is making in your life. And if you're a person who is too new to have done any of those things, or too busy, too overwhelmed by the rest of life, you might think about what it might be like to do some of that work. I would assert that none of us emerges from such a collaboration, such a commitment, such an exercise of personal growth unchanged. I know that's true for me. So another reason that I have often preached on collaboration is that I thought I was good at it. In fact, real collaboration, perhaps especially in a religious context, is one of the most challenging parts of my work as a minister. I am not always good at it. It might be the most challenging part of your work as a congregant. Perhaps, like me, you're still learning how to do it, and that is all because people truly are different. Deciding to work with people who are not like me, in other words, anybody and everybody, means I take the risk of being open to ideas and convictions and beliefs and life lessons that are not the same as my life lessons, my convictions, my beliefs, and my ideas. This is good, since what I know is not enough, and it's scary because I do not know what will happen, not exactly. And I certainly don't know how it might change me. Collaboration is not just a smart, good way to grow a church, to encourage generosity. It is actually an act of faith that I will grow and that something better might happen. Not will necessarily, but might happen. And that might happen for you as well. Now, when I first started out, when I was stubbornly being and about to be seminarian, and for many years afterwards, that much not being in control would have been really hard for me. I didn't know. that I was signing up for this much personal and spiritual growth when I went to seminary, which makes me wonder what I was thinking. Let's back up a little, actually a lot, historically, and put some context around this. I want to talk to you briefly about how religion has evolved. An evolution in religion, like everything else, is both inevitable and the way things should be. Religions promote eternal truths. Imagine capital E, capital T. That's true from the earliest Judaism or Asian philosophy to our Unitarian Universalist principles. Now, eternal truths may have stayed the same-ish, but teachings about how faithful people learn and know and interact with those truths has evolved a lot. The oldest forms of religion, some of which are still very much alive, draw people into the presence of a holy power. Not to have a discussion, but so that the people might be transformed in surrendering to and trusting in that greater power. Think of Catholicism or Islam. The focus is less on ideas or community or changing the world, and more on symbols and ritual and mystery and power. In those systems of thought and practice, religion is not something to talk about. It's something that is, that takes people in and says, you are part of something, you belong here, inside. My parents, especially my father, felt about his Catholic faith that way. At least I think he did, but as I said before, we never talked about it. Perhaps some of you or members of your family know just what that kind of religion is like. And in that expectation, it's probably important to say that Unitarian Universalism, the way we do it, doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. So just park that there for a minute. In the not quite so old religions, the Christian traditions that grew out of the Protestant Reformation, for example, the focus shifted away from symbols and ritual to the Word, capital W, the Word, high pulpits. The focus was on preaching, on long sermons, and lots of them. This was not just true for Baptists and Calvinists and Presbyterians, also Unitarians. You need to know this. In New England, here, and not very far away from here, the idea was to have a good, maybe a 2-hour service, most of which was the sermon, in the morning, and then another one in the afternoon. Really? Really? And they weren't heated, if you remember that, which is why people had little coal stoves they brought to the church with them. The reason for parish halls, I learned this when I served a church in Massachusetts, parish halls were required for congregations in the Puritan days. And that's because there needed to be a place where people could gather and eat lunch in between the morning and the afternoon, because otherwise if they went home for lunch, they might not come back. Now, in the 20th century, in our country, in some religious traditions, there was another shift, a different understanding of how to move people toward truth with a capital T, which involved less listening to sermons, more guitars, more music, more discussion, and more opportunities to do work together. This was, in some ways, another shift in power in churches, from the minister to the lay leaders, to committees and teams. The locus of authority was still clear. The minister was still the spiritual leader, though nobody ever defined what that meant. But people now had authority too. Freedom to question, to figure out who they were individually and as a congregation in the world, what they were called to do and be, how to make life better for more people. That was good. And it created, of course, competing authorities, which may be part of the reason why the number of church conflicts accelerated during those decades of the 20th century, and why the fights in congregations were almost always about who gets to decide everything. And that usually translated, perhaps somewhat strangely, into whether the minister should leave. in the 21st century, in our time, this discussion and working together model is still in place in religious communities like CVUUS, like the First UU Society in Burlington, where I just was. But there's another shift happening all around us, and not just in religion, it's also in our culture, I think, and I hope. The edges of our congregations are shifting and changing, partly because, thank you, pandemic, people can pay attention and even get involved in our religious tradition without even being present in person because of the internet and social media. Approximately 100 people view the services of the Burlington Society. That's every week. Not always on Sunday morning. Most of them, maybe fewer than half on Sunday morning, but at some point during the week. And we don't know who they are. I cannot tell you the number of times in Greater Burlington that I have been someplace and people come up and say, Reverend Tricia, it's so nice to see you, and I have no idea who they are. But they think I know who they are because they've been watching the service every Sunday for, it's a mind-blowing thing, and it's real. And it's just one of the many reasons that it's gotten harder to tell who we are. You know, the us, the Unitarian Universalists, the people who are different from everybody else, and maybe because we're just a little smarter or something. Not being able to tell quite who we are is confusing, and it's also good. We allow ourselves to look for inspiration and ideas and lessons from sources beyond our own tradition, even from people who are not Unitarian Universalist. Which I gotta say feels really different from the ways that we used to do church 35 years ago, actually, I guess maybe closer to 40, when I first joined that church in Yarmouth, Maine. Back then, what I understood the minister and the leaders of a congregation were supposed to do was to learn a lot, know things, talk amongst ourselves enough so that we could get it right, so that we could understand and preach truth here inside, assuming that the rest of the world probably wouldn't agree with us. And so supporting one another against what can seem like a monolithic other. Just one example of that, the church that my husband and I served in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a beautiful, beautiful building. It was finished in 1909. And if you stand outside it and you look at it critically, you say, this really looks like a fortress. Lots of wrought iron fences, windows you can't see in. And that wasn't a mistake. That building was built to be a sanctuary, a safe place for liberal-minded people in a very conservative city. It was not actually meant to be welcoming to all on purpose. Isn't that a weird thing to say out loud? But it was a way to be who they were, which they understood was not the way the community understood. There's stories of how the buses would go down the street, Chestnut Street, the street the church is on, and say, point at the building and say, that's where the Satan worshipers. More stories, but not right now. I think that now, instead of trying to know everything, maybe our movement is toward trying to be more attentive, to listen to the voices around us, here and outside, to notice who's in the room and who is not, to notice the wisdom, to lift it up as well as we can. And I love the quote that's at the top of your order of service. Collaboration is not about gluing together existing egos. It's about the ideas that never existed until after everyone entered the room. So real collaboration, working with others to create and produce and build something, that's what the dictionary tells me that the good definition of collaboration is, that nasty, traitorous one we won't talk about. It's not about my agenda, as important as agendas can be. It's not about coming in with a 6-point action plan, even though some of us really like those. But the truth is, of course, the whole time I'm thinking about my plan that I brought in, that's in my pocket, I am not really listening to or seeing what's happening around me. Collaborative religious works, shared ministry, is about paying attention to what matters most and hanging on to that, whether internally with one another or with our partners in community. This is hard work because it is disconcerting and unpredictable, and because it is not, at least for some of us, the way we were taught. It's hard and confusing, and it works in the sense of being effective. Good ideas and good plans emerge. It works because it can move people toward the conviction that life is good and worthy, that people are worth listening to, that we can change our minds. The reason I love the story of Dr. Cutler on the plane is because he decides to try to not hate this person whose name he doesn't even know, but who is his enemy, except she's not. And he gives us that description of how he finds a way to decide maybe not to hate her. We can all do that, even when we're not stuck in middle seats on planes, which personally I hate. But something like that can move us closer to the knowledge that we are utterly dependent on each other. You'll be hearing more from me about all of this, so I will stop here with this one idea that you'll be hearing from me and Reverend Christina a lot, which is that this is a time, I believe, in the life of this congregation, not just to do things as well as we possibly can, but to experiment with doing things differently, doing new things. Not because they'll all be great, not because they will all be something we ought to hang on to, but because we can learn so much from that. And even in experiencing ourselves, I don't like this, you can learn something from that as well. I really look forward to going through that experience with you. And I want to make sure that you know that one experiment is actually happening this week, this Thursday, right, Ronnie? At 7 o'clock, there will be a Vespers service that Reverend Christina is going to lead, and Ronnie with poetry and silence and music. You might come and see what you think. This is holy work. I'm still learning how to do it and how to trust it. And we all can collaborate in that important work, which is an honor and a good thing. So may it be. Let us sing.
let's let Thoreau take us out. Thoreau also wrote, October answers to that period in our lives when we are no longer dependent on our transient moods, when all our experience ripens into wisdom, and every root, branch, leaf of us glows with maturity. What we have been and done in our spring and summer appears, we bear our fruit. So as we go through this beautiful week coming up, let's bear our fruit.